Welcome to the Black Appalachian Coalition's podcast entitled Black Remembering, where we will bring to you the heavy and the hope across the Ohio River Valley. We want to remember who we are, where we've come from. We want to speak to the oral history of what we've done, what we've achieved. We want to speak to the ills that we have experienced while also finding solutions to those problems, those issues. We want to deal with the narrative that has kept us deeply rooted in despair. Now we want to punch through that narrative and stand up and say, we are remembering our Black past, and we are rooted, and we are here to stay. Welcome to Black Remembering. We hope that you find your place, your space, and your voice in this podcast.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Black Remembering podcast, where we highlight the heavy and the hope. The Black Appalachian Coalition, or BLAC, is a nonprofit organization founded by Bishop Marcia Dinkins. To find out more about the Black Appalachian Coalition and our Black Fellows, visit our website or check out our social media pages listed in our show notes. My name is Nita Jade, and I am delighted and honored to host Miss Glenis Redmond, the Queen Wordsmith, teaching artist, imagination activist, survivor and thriver, a living legend among us. Let me tell y'all a little bit about Miss Glenis, courtesy of GlenisRedmond.com. Glenis Redmond is grounded in many worlds as a poet, teaching artist, and imagination activist. As a poet, her feet are firmly planted on both the page and the stage. As a teaching artist, her educational reach extends into the classroom, where she teaches both students and teachers to open to their own poetry within. As an imagination activist, she uses the bright bloom of her heart and soul to unlock the doors of creativity in others in the community at large. She is a gentle pen pusher. Glenis Redmond is the first Poet Laureate of Greenville, South Carolina, the first. She is a Kennedy Center teaching artist and a Cave Canem alumni. She has authored 6 books of poetry: Backbone, Under the Sun, and What My Hands Say, Listening Skin, Three Harriets and Others, and praise songs for Dave the Potter, art by Jonathan Green, and poetry by Glenis Redmond. The Listening Skin was longlisted for the PEN America Open Book Award and the Julie Suk Award. Glenis received the highest arts award in South Carolina, the Governor's Award, and was inducted into the South Carolina Academy of Authors. Glenis is a veteran reservist. She is living with cancer and was diagnosed with stage 3 multiple myeloma in July of 2019. Glenis is a cancer advocate as she works to help improve the lives of people living with cancer. Her motto is Bloom Anyhow. She is a Charlie Award recipient awarded by the Carolina Mountains Literary Festival and was recently a recipient of the Peacemaker Award by the Upstate Mediation Center in 2022. Glenis is the mother of twin daughters, Amber Scherer and Celeste Scherer Farmand, and she is the Gaga of Julian, Paisley, and Quinn. Other than poetry, her passions are gardening, dancing, and collecting art and fluvox. Did I say that right?
Yep, you got it.
Ooh, okay. Welcome to the show, Ms. Glenis.
Oh, Nita Jade, poetry daughter. Thank you for that lovely introduction. It is so good to talk to you today.
Of course, and I appreciate your time and willingness to share with our Heavy Hope listeners. I'm going to try so hard to get through this episode without crying. We're going to see.
Well, you and me both then. Me and you both.
Now, Ms. Glenis and I go way, way back. This is my heart right here. And I'm happy we get to have a conversation with you. Let's dive right in, because I will sit here and talk everybody's heads off. So first question I like to start off with, where are you from?
That's a hard question for me to answer, but I am from Greenville, South Carolina. I was born in Sumter Shaw Air Force Base, and I say it's hard because I'm an Air Force brat, but firmly rooted in South Carolina.
Got you. So how would you describe Greenville as you grew up? Like, what did you witness in your respective hometown?
Well, I love Greenville. I am the poet laureate, but I have to say it was one of those push-pull loves early on because we retired. My father retired in 76. So when we were living in Aviano, Italy, from there we went to New Jersey, Central Jersey, and he only stayed 6 months and then he retired, and then we came back home. And so in 76, it was a culture shock for me. In some ways, it felt like, because we didn't move to Greenville proper, we moved to Piedmont, which was out in the country, and cow pastures. And it was tough. It was tough as a person who had learned to navigate going anywhere and everywhere. There were a lot of lines that were, I thought, invisible lines that I crossed over that were tough. They were tough for me and the people who perceived me as someone who did not understand place, but I understood place. And my idea of place is that I could be everywhere my body inhabited.
Thank you. So you spoke about place and being in the country, and I'm curious, do you have a relationship with the land, like with the literal earth?
I do. So my maternal lineage is very strong in my blood. That's not to say anything bad about my paternal lineage, but I was raised by my mother and her mother. These were women who, worked the land. They picked cotton. My mother picked 250 pounds of cotton. My grandmother picked 350 pounds of cotton. And that's no joke. It's what they came into being. So they knew the world by the land, by the sun, by the moon. And I did too, from extension of them. And so I did live my first 6 years in South Carolina, and then we started traveling. But by way of extension, I had their land running through me, their rootedness running through me, no matter whether we were in the Carolinas or not.
The ways that they connected with the land, did you carry that with you into your adulthood?
Oh, most definitely. When we lived in Aviano, Italy, I was 12 years old, and I decided that for no reason other than I saw the Italian women, the Italian grandmothers with gardens, and I decided to grow my own garden.
Yeah.
And my family laughed at me because the soil was so rocky in Vaillant, was the village we lived in. And nobody helped me. No one came at my aid, my mom, my dad, my siblings, nothing. But I went and got seeds at the Four Seasons store on base, came back, and I turned that earth. I put those seeds in the ground. They laughed at me, but come spring, everybody was eating from my garden. As you say, did it carry on to my adult life? I just wrote an essay talking about my foremothers' garden. And I think what was going on with my mom then, she was so far away from home and had been away from home for years when they started traveling across the world. And I think she was trying to forget, not necessarily the land, but what had taken place on the land racially. And the hard work of being a sharecropper's daughter and, being the lineage of enslavement in our line. So she kind of brushed her shoulders, of the earth and the dirt and didn't look back. But when they retired in 76, I noticed my mom had a garden again. Like when they bought a home in South Carolina, all of a sudden, not vegetables, but flower garden. There was some like grapevines and stuff like that. And then I realized that my mother was definitely this plant woman, and she talked to her plants. And one day I said to her, I don't think you like your plants more than you love your 5 children. My mother never denied it. She never denied it. But her plants loved her, and she loved them right back. And the secret that I've learned from the 12-year-old Glenis to 2019, when I was diagnosed with cancer, and then COVID came in, one of the things I turned to was my garden. I had kept a garden, but running across the country as a poet and teaching artist, I didn't have time to keep up with all those things in my house plants. And then I reverted back to that so easily. And I always thought, well, I don't necessarily have a green thumb. That's my mother and my grandmother. But I realized I actually do. If you ride by my house, my townhome, you would recognize it immediately, or most people say they do, because there's a bottle tree in the front yard. There's a blue bottle tree in the backyard, and there's flowers surrounding the townhome. And so the secret that I think my mother didn't tell me, she said she talked to her plants, but what I have observed, her plants talk back and she listens. And I think that's the relationship, the part of the relationship that I'm learning now is not just talking to your plants, but listen to them when they talk to you and water your roots. And I mean that literally and metaphorically.
What do you mean when you say the plants talk back?
They tell you. They tell you when they're thirsty. They tell you when they need sun. They tell you when they need food. They just, but you have to be still enough to understand. And I always saw my mother doing that. She still does it when she comes over my house. She'll come over and we'll do this and that and the other. But I know the last 30, my mom's like, I gotta go now. We're Southern, right? So we say bye 5 times. We Black Southern. We say bye, we say bye 5 times. But that 5th time means that she's gonna stay 30 more minutes and she's gonna tell me what every one of my plants need. That one's dry as dirt. That one you gotta go and you need to pinch them dead leaves off. She just, and so I'm still studying at the foot of my mother, but I realize that the land is a way to survive and thrive, and it's not a one-way relationship. And I think a lot of times we have been so disconnected as Black folks from nature because of what has been done to us, what's happened in history. So those of us who have a link of a mother or grandmother who did, out there, and grandfathers too, and great grandfathers, but it wasn't until I slowed down that I really understood the power of listening.
Wow, thank you. I got the pleasure of going to Roots and Remedies in St. Louis, and one of the workshops was titled "Healing Our Relationship with the Land and Letting the Land Heal Us Through Herbal Remedies."
Nice.
And you are speaking on similar things that the workshop host was speaking on, like how disconnected some Black and brown people have become because of the violence that others have enacted upon us in relationship with the land, and how reclaiming that is healing in and of itself.
Right.
And something is, I think someone in the workshop said this process is called earthing, where you literally just go out and you put your hands and your feet in the soil and you let the sun wash over you.
Yes.
And like that's healing in and of itself. And it's simplistic and accessible for everyone. And that's just been on my mind and heart. So
yeah, and it's so simple, but my 109-year-old grandmother knew that. Like every day, 20 minutes in the sun, she didn't play. She just sat out there. And this woman with a 3rd grade education, she knew something. And she knew something about the healing aspect of the land. And, taking your shoes off and walking barefoot, but even not just the history and what has happened or done to us as a race of people, it's also the internalized hate that we ourselves have absorbed. Like one of the ways that I note that Black people can put Black people down is call him country. He's so country.
Yes.
And it's just like, and wait. What? Is that a bad thing? What are you trying to say? So I just think some of that is inherent in us that we haven't healed. Country is good. Country is healing. Country is being in tune with something other than the outside man-made world.
Yes.
So call me country, because I am.
I want to speak on this a little bit more because I often ask our guests about the term Appalachia and whether or not they identify with it or reject it. And even in undergrad, when I spoke to my best friends about the term, when I started identifying as Appalachian, the whole pushback was, I'm not country, I'm Southern, or I'm from a
Mm,
Southern city, so I'm not country. And I'm like, I think that's the whole point of the term, is to like expand upon what we think Appalachia the Appalachian region is, period. And the fact
yeah,
that, Black and brown people have always been here.
right.
So could you speak a little bit on whether or not you identify as Appalachian?
Well, yeah, most definitely identify as Appalachian. I mean, because when Frank X. Walker and Nikki Finney, that term came into my view, it filled a hole in my psyche because I was living in Asheville, North Carolina, and I just had so many things told to me when I came there as a Black poet in the slam world. But I wasn't just in the slam world. I was, a community activist as well. I was just doing so many things, but I would always have well-meaning white people who would come up to me and say stuff like, well, slavery didn't happen here, and blah 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 blah. There would be so many untruths and myths
Mm,
about our people, you know in that area. And, just so happened where I lived in Asheville on Forest Hill Drive, it was right behind a Confederate cemetery. And then my street was a major Native American trail. And then 2 blocks over was a slave cemetery. And so I didn't get a whole lot of rest living in that house because I'm an open vessel. But, the thing is that this erasure about us not being here, or we did not have this relationship with the Cherokee making wagons, for the trails, all of that stuff goes to the background. But just because people don't know it does not mean our existence wasn't real and true. So I'm always trying to find ways to claim space, and not just for me personally, but for us as a community. So Appalachian, that meant a lot to me in my psyche. And I also coined a term that people are using now, but I was using it way before social media in relationship to Appalachia. I started calling myself Afro-Carolinian. Yeah, my people came from, not just South Carolina, but North Carolina as well. And so that was another way that I don't think I would have coined if I had not heard the term Appalachian. So I gravitate to those, and I think it's a beautiful way for us to start opening the space and for people to lose some of this internalized hate that we carry around. I'm not from the country. I'm from an urban city. And you know what? Just check the lineage and see what your grandma and your grandfather and see what they did, see what they know, and then come back and tell me if you're a city dweller. Because it only takes 3 miles to get out of Atlanta or Asheville or anywhere, to get out a few miles to get out of downtown. And where are you? You're out of city limits. You're in the country. And if you own land as a Black person, I mean, to me, that is a beautiful and powerful thing.
I'm thinking of people who reject the term out of the hurt that they've experienced in
Yes.
relation to the region and in relation to the term. And
Yes.
I've already expressed in previous episodes, listeners, that I'm biased and I am for Appalachia. So I highly encourage anyone to reconsider, why
Right.
you reject it if you do, why you accept
Yes.
it if you do.
Yes.
But I want to move along, and I want to talk about poetry because that's how we met. Poetry introduced us to each other. Miss Glenis visited my elementary school. I think I was in kindergarten or first grade or whatever, and it was a predominantly white institution in PWI. And I remember I was amazed, for one, that like the whole school was doing this assembly and there was a Black woman at the front, like we were assembling for, like that was the first time that my mind was blown in a way like that. Like, and I remember everyone around me was really obsessed with the movement of your poem. I think you pantomimed like a box as you were
Yes,
speaking.
yes,
And
The Termite by Ogden Nash. Yeah.
I remember thinking like, yeah, that's cool. But also remember like listening to the words and rocking back and forth, because that's how I process things to this day. And I remember like coming up to you later and asking you to sign my poster. And I held on to that for years, 4 years, like a little fan person. And
Oh,
I had gotten into poetry in middle school, and my middle school teacher was like, come meet this person. And she pulled me out of one of the gym or home ec or something. And we had a one-on-one poetry session. And I was like, oh, this is Miss Glenis. Like this, I have your poster at home. Like I was starstruck or awed, and I still am to this day. But you took the time to workshop a poem with me, to give me feedback. And at that time, I was a baby poet, a new poet. I didn't want anybody's feedback, but I wanted yours. And I remember like going back and making those edits. And towards the end of it, um, you gave me your contact information and you said, if you need anything, let me know. And I was so used to people saying that without meaning it. And so I kind of was like, oh, okay, that's nice, and disregarded it a little bit. So a hop, skip, and a jump later in the future, there was a poetry slam or something in Asheville,
yeah,
and my mom
yeah.
had to work and I couldn't get there. So I reached out to Miss Glennis, like, I need a ride basically. And you said, okay. And later
Yeah.
on, like when I got older, I realized that you would, when you came up to Berea, you were telling me and this other poet that I cherish that that you had an event that day and came up to get me and take
Yeah.
me to, like, came
Yeah.
out your way to take me to
Yeah.
this poetry. And that was my introduction to the whole poetry slam scene.
Right.
That snowballed my entire identity as a poet. So for one, thank you. Thank you so.
Oh, I gave you my business card, but on the back, I wrote my cell phone number, which I do not regularly do. But I read your
Mhm.
poem and knew you were somebody. I said, listen, you need anything, call me. And so most people would have my home number or my work number, but I gave you a direct line. Just know that. And so
Whew.
when you called, I was so happy that you had took me up on my offer. And the other thing is that even though I was busy, I also realized that there was nothing as important as getting you to where you needed to go that day.
You didn't have to do that, right? And
Oh,
you
but I
listened to
did.
it.
No, but I did. I had to do it. That was an assignment, and I could either pass or fail. And
Mhm.
I chose to pass. And I showed to put my money where my mouth was. You
Mhm.
can run around and do community engagement all day, but if a person, you, who I believed in, shows up, you are the person I've been waiting for. You are the person why I did this. I mean, meeting you in kindergarten and first grade, that all that's appointed. We don't know. We come to a place for one thing, but we never know what the real reason while we're there. And the real reason I was at that school was to be. I acted out those poems. I did those poems. I showed up with my locks hanging down my back the way I did because I was putting myself, positioning myself for students, people, humans, artists, poets like you. I had to.
Thank you. So I have a two-part question for you
Yes.
that kind of ties these two together. How did you get started in poetry, and what does community mean to you?
Okay. Okay. First part, I think poetry followed me. I was in the fifth
Mm.
grade, and heard my first poem. It's a poem by Jackie Early, 1,968 Winners. And it may be a moment like you had when you saw me. She wasn't performing, but there was a 10th grader during Black History. The Black History program was performing it. And when she finished that poem, I pretty much was made a poet by the end of that poem. Because this sister came in with all this swag and all this energy and put her whole self into I never saw a poem operate like that. I said, that's how I want to operate a poem. Every time I get up, I want to embody the whole piece. So that I knew that in the 5th grade. Now, I wasn't writing in it, but I was a voracious reader. It wasn't until we moved back to South Carolina a couple years later, 2.5 years later, that I had a teacher who assigned us a journal writing project, and we had to write in our journals. Well, then I started writing about my angst, my feeling like I was an other because I loved reading. I was constantly being called white because I loved to read. Even though I was reading the Blackest authors by then, I was reading the Blackest. I was Richard, Black Boy and Man Child on the Promised Land. Like I was reading Black stuff, and I was being called white. And then it moved to Gloria Naylor and Sonia Sanchez and Nikki Giovanni. But I guess what I did was I just started schooling myself because none of that was taught in school. So, I was self-taught as far as poetry. And then with the journal, I just started writing myself into existence. That's what I call my journal. My journal is my origin story. Poetry helped me. It gave me agency. It gave me social emotional skills. I mean, when you write poetry, you start reflecting and figuring out where you fit into the line. And then at the same time, simultaneously, Roots started playing as a mini series. And so, there's only 3-4 channels. Everybody watched Roots, and our school almost rioted because Black people for the first time saw their story. We saw our story, our history. And so that combination, it just kept working on me. Then I started looking, I want my story. I want to investigate my roots. So I started pretty early. I'm a first generation college student. I willed myself to college. There was nobody in my circle who told me to go to college. Matter of fact, the college counselor said, we have a cosmetology program. We have all these vocational experiences, education that you can do, culinary, cosmetology. But if you clearly were looking at my grades, you would say college. So I had to fight someone trying to displace me. And even people who I loved were trying to displace me. All you need to do is get married and blah, blah, blah. And I went on and majored in psychology. I did not go down the poetry road purposely because I didn't see a way to, I didn't see anybody doing that. So I just, ended up working on a master's in psychology and then or child and family studies, and then got stolen from there to VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, a fellowship in counseling. And I was there for a year and I just knew, nothing against the academic towers, but I was not fitting. Nothing was making sense. I was married. I found out I was pregnant with twins. And that's when I took a strong look within and knew that I needed to do something else. And I told my major advisor that he asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, poetry. That's how I found poetry and poetry found me.
What does community mean to you?
Community means everything. People talk about community engagement and all these things as if it is like this formal role, but it was never a formal role for me. What I saw my mother do as a church member and and on the usher board and people always constantly dropping clothes by for her to hem or fix or sew or needed a pound cake. I learned to be a community activist from her. And to me, Community just means, just like we were talking about those plants, like we were talking about those flowers, just listen and be a part of it. I think we have some unnatural things set up in our American society that prevent us to be full relationship as community, because we're so compartmentalized these days. And that's part of the disease. And I have to say, I'm culpable. I'm part of that. I'm complicit, because my work that I did 28 years now, or 29 years on the road, it did remove me from, so I had to start throwing my line. I had to make community mean something, not just local, not just regional, but also national. But I watched my mother and I watched my grandmother, and they taught me how to do that. And then, the performer part was, came really directly down the line of my father, who we didn't have the best relationship. But, when you look at Johnny Redmond, a lot of times, I'm looking at myself. My father was a consummate pianist and storyteller and liar, like could lie and could play spades, and was a pool shark. He had stab in his, somebody stabbed him in the alley. I mean, he's got the wounds to prove it. I mean, my father was an artist. I mean, complete artist. And so I had the artist on one hand and a community leader on the other hand. And I think that, my road was fated. So community fulfills something for me, not just for me, but it's just like the other part of it is when you give back, that's it. And I got a lot. I mean, I got myself to places that I could have the capacity to care about others. And that's what I have. And I think that's what community is. I just, having the capacity not to be just worried about yourself or concerned with self, that you have capacity to see others.
Thank you. That you bringing in your parents and your grandparents made me think of my grandma and my mama, and how my grandma showed community just by like volunteering in the cafe at our church and like making sure everyone ate. And my mom always says, look out for the cookout. So now I'm thinking like, look out for the cookout. Everybody eats like that. Yeah. Just make sure we all good.
Yeah.
That's
the village.
Yes.
We know this. This is something we've always known,
And it's something I want to hold on to, because I feel like even during the pandemic, even a little bit before that, like people started isolating themselves and only worrying about themselves. And that's something that I'm guilty of as well. Like walking with the community mindset, not just stepping into a role, like you said.
Right. And finding a different way to show up. I mean, come on, everybody's not on the front line. You do not have to be on the front line, especially those who've been on the front line a lot of our lives. But I'm just saying there are other ways to give back. There's other ways to serve. And I have to say, you find those ways. Whatever your talents and gifts, they will tell you how. And right now, one of the ways I feel like I'm serving is, as a medical advocate for others, especially for Black women who are, we are not number one on the list when it comes to care. And so just finding ways to do, whatever it means, I think because we have come from a lineage of people who work hard and harder, we think we have to work that way. But I think there are ways. You deserve peace, you deserve ease, and self-care is one of the best things you can do for yourself. And shrinking back is a form of self-preservation. And so preserve, and then when you feel like you got something to give, then you give it. But don't be, I remember when I was getting out of the counseling field, there was a counseling supervisor, and I said, I don't know if I really cut out for this work. He said, as long as you have something to give. And then when you don't, you know what that means? That means rest. The land has the seed, it lies fallow for a reason. And that we do too. We are like the seasons. We're not supposed to be in spring perpetually.
Right.
So that is it all comes back to the land. It all comes back to just follow the cycles. It tells us what to do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I usually end every episode by asking for each guest to drop some knowledge on us. I think you already did that with Blooming anyhow. Do you maybe have a call to action to leave with our listeners?
More now than ever before, trust your intuition. Trust your heart. Just whatever it's saying, even if it's going contrary to whatever path you're on. And be still. It's okay to be still. You do not have to win this race, but you will complete it. And it's okay to be who you are, not in opposition to anyone else. This life is not a competition. Try to get through it with as much love as you can possibly receive and give.
Wow. Thank you, Ms. Glenis. That was right on time. And my hope for anyone who is listening that came to y'all right on time. Thanks for tuning in to Black Remembering, highlighting the heavy and the hope. Check out our show notes for links and resources mentioned in today's episode. Peace and blessings, y'all.